Welcome, fans, to another edition of the Old School Shooters podcast. My name is Jack Kilby, Executive Vice President of Great North Wrestling. We are very pleased tonight to have with us a man who has a very, very extensive history and quite a story to tell. Not so much this time in terms of pro wrestling, although he did make his debut for Great North Wrestling this past Saturday in Smith Falls, Ontario, against the British Bulldog Jr. Harry Smith, and that was one heck of a match, as the King will speak to. But this time we're focusing on the shoot background, the catch as catch can wrestling, the accomplishments of one Little Guido or Nunzio. Nunzio, how are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me. Give my little hello. A little hello.
That's awesome. Can't get enough of that. Thank you for coming on tonight. Now, the second man in this three-man booth is, of course, the King of Connecticut. King, tonight, how are you doing? You look like you're in a little bit of a laid-back mood and motif. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, man. Normally I do the show in my little, I call the Florida room, like between the house and the screen and pool, and relax there. But I just I'm down the road this evening. I'm down in the Cocoa Beach, Florida area, and really excited to have our guest on. Tremendous guest, tremendous match that I called with Harry. But before I get into that, I just want to say that our namesake here, the man who made this all possible, Devin Nicholson, the Hannibal, what a phenomenal job he did on Dark Side of the Ring last night, Jack. I was able to watch the episode as it premiered, and Hannibal, as always, he was calm, he was concise, and he was powerful. And I don't want to let the cat out of the bag about the episode, but it's that Dark Side of the Ring Abdullah Hannibal episode, and you guys, you've got to watch it. It's awesome.
I'm looking forward to that. I had just watched last night. I watched Junkyard Dog, actually. So I'm a little behind. So I will get to that one. I have not seen that one yet. I've saw a lot of them, Tammy and Chris and a bunch of others. So I look forward to that.
So before we set the table in terms of your history in the catch wrestling, shoot fighting domain, I wanted to ask you if you had a good experience with Great North Wrestling in Smith Falls, Ontario, and your match against Harry Smith.
I had a great experience. Everything went very well on my way in, and everything. Match went off. I thought the crowd was great. I thought you had a great crowd. Hopefully you guys were happy. They seemed very into it. And you could just tell everybody had a good time. We had a nice time afterwards. Of course, the weather was a little bad, so travel was a little rough, but can't complain. And I had a great time, and we'll see what happens, or maybe I come back again one day. And as far as the match goes, I enjoyed it. I'm actually looking very forward to seeing it, and hopefully that will be coming up soon. And that's it. I had a great experience, and I wouldn't just say that. Trust me.
Absolutely. And the feedback that the fans that were in attendance was 100% positive. You're definitely a pro wrestling icon and legend. But before we delve into that any further, King, I'm going to throw it to you to get to the heart of the matter of this particular Old School Shooters broadcast.
Yeah, man. And as always with our podcast, Old School Shooters, we're silver sages spreading knowledge to the younger ages. And before we get into the combat sports and wrestling and stuff, I want to mention, Nunzio has always been known as the Sicilian shooter. And one of my favorite places in the world is Sicily, and more specifically Mondello Beach and Shaka, where I have family actually down in Shaka, which is about 50 miles south of Mondello. Oh, the most beautiful place in the world, Jack. Turquoise water, white sand, beautiful palm trees, great architecture. And man, do they know how to live. You know, I'm of, I call myself a Mixilian because my father was actually half Irish, but my grandparents came from the Palermo area in down in Shaka, and Shaka's so beautiful. You know, I made a dish over the weekend. My daughter loves to cook. You know, she's in her early 20s, and their mother also was of Italian descent, and we made this big fish dish that was fantastic, with red onions and castafitrano olives, capers, cherry tomatoes, some white wine, fish on top. It was fantastic. And we like to drink. You know, the drinks when I go to Shaka, they're big on the Campari and soda with orange juice, and I like to tweak that. I like Aperol better with Pinot Grigio and little OJ. So yeah, just living the life, you know. And what a great guest! What a tremendous guest we have, and what a great history he has. And what I want to start off with is, I know a gentleman's watching the show. Is his name is Steve Nelson. And before I bring the guests in, I wanna mention the promotion that he had in Amarillo, Texas. And this was back when most states MMA wasn't legally sanctioned. And he ran this promotion, USWF, United Shoot Wrestling Federation, under pro wrestling rules. And we'll talk about UWFI and bleeding into Pancras, no open hand strikes, and UFC superstars like Heath Herring came out of the promotion. Steve sent me a great documentary that he was a part of producing about the late great UFC middleweight champion Evan Tanner, who was a star in the promotion. And another star in the promotion that was actually in the main event of the very first show against Steve Nelson is our guest. And I know he's done a lot of interviews, but I don't think a lot of people have delved into the USWF. What a transformative promotion it was. So I just want to give you the floor, Nunzio, to talk about Steve Nelson and the USWF.
Yeah. Well, some people may not even know this. The way I know Steve Nelson was from UWFI. You know, I wrestled. I got a job with UWFI. Steve was already working there. Him, Gene Leidick, Billy Scott, and I ended up getting a tryout in Nashville, Tennessee, and stuff. And they ended up flying me in, and I ended up working out with Billy Scott and Gene Leidick with a bunch of guys. There was like 6 of us, and you know, I didn't know what was really going on. They sent a note to my professional wrestling school, and they were talking about this wrestling company. And it was, I'm talking about UWFI at the moment. Then I'll get Steve. And they asked me to go for a tryout. So I went there with with like 6, 7 other guys. I didn't know them. They were from all other places. And then we just got in the ring with Billy and Gene and some other guy, a Japanese guy. And they just stressed the shit out of us. I knew how to wrestle. That's why I went. I was an amateur wrestler. I was captain of my wrestling team. But the difference was they were just as good as me in wrestling. And then they knew the missions. I had no idea what they were. I never even heard of it. And the object in amateur wrestling is not to go more than 45-degree angle. And that's what I've been used to. These motherfuckers were going way more than 45-degree angle. And I never knew what shooting was. I never knew what stretching meant. I never knew that. And they just made us tap out religiously. And you know, we just kept coming back. And they ended up, out of everybody, accepting me out of that whole group. And they ended up, and I was training with Gene Leidick and Billy. And now they were training me on what to do. Then I started going to Japan, and that's how I hooked up with Steve Nelson. And then our careers went from there, and then UWFI ended, and Steve started his promotion.
Yeah, and you know, Steve Nelson's father is a legendary shooter in the business, Gordy Nelson.
Yep. I know all about him. We used to talk about him all the time. Big legend in the business.
Yeah, and his mother, Steve's mother, was a professional wrestler too.
Yeah,
and
Steve's actually a promoter or a booker too at one time. A promoter, I thought. But I remember in the business. I could be wrong on the promoter part, but I know she wrestled, and I remember hearing about that. I'm like, really? Your mom was in the business too? I was like, wow. Yeah. I don't know why that's sticking in my mind, like she ran a show or did something, but I could be wrong on that one.
I think his family did promote, in Amarillo. And, you know, Steve has always been close to Terry Funk.
Yes.
And, you know, in Amarillo, Texas, the Funk family, I mean, they're wrestling royalty, right? And the Nelson family is second to only to the Funk family in Amarillo. Yeah, and it was so unique because during that time, people think now there's MMA all over the country. There's these small shows all over the country. People forget that it wasn't legal for the longest time. And my home state, Connecticut, and New York. New York's got a real interesting history with
Right.
UFC and extreme fighting, where it became legal, and then, you know, was a extreme ran in New York City. They weren't supposed to, and then it became illegal again. But Connecticut, we had some big fights in Mohegan Sun, but that's because that were on the Indian land. So what Steve did was so unique, so transformative, and it spawned some big stars. And I want you to give your fans, you know, your thoughts on USWF, because you competed a couple times. You went against Steve Nelson, and then you came back, right?
Yeah, I came back, and I don't know what the guy was, but it was some karate guy. Honestly, at that time, and I think Steve will tell you this. I think he's coming on. Hopefully, I think you said. I got brought in. Steve, we finished up with UWFI. Steve started his own promotion. He called me, and he's like, "Hey, I got this thing going on." He goes, want you to come in, and we'll go. He's running a show. He goes, "But you got to be ready to go." He goes, more like a tough man contest. If you watched it, it was more like if you watch all the different matches of everything. So Steve pretty much let me know, we're gonna go. I was like, oh, okay. And at that time too, I was kind of getting involved in ECW. So I was kind of done with UWFI. I wasn't training as much, but I was like, all right. And you know what? I just got psyched up, and we went out there and we just fucking went at each other. And he was great. We just had a lot of, we had a lot of pride going for each other and stuff like that. And it was kind of thinking it was going to be like just the last time, when we went out there, and we just went at each other. And it just, and I watch it back sometimes, and I just, I miss it. It was just great. You don't realize it when you're doing it. I had a different state of mind.
Absolutely.
Back and watch it now, I liked it. And then I was pretty much done there. And then Steve called me, and then he's like, "Hey, I want you to come back." He's running another show like that. He was like, "You could fight this." He knows karate or whatever. And I was kind of like already wrestling as Damian Stone, and already met Paul Heyman at this point. I was doing shit there, and I was kind of getting away from the fighting. There's a difference. When you're doing that, you got to be training all the time and stuff. You can't just be picking spots and going and fighting people. You got to be, and my mind wasn't there. I was doing professional wrestling, and then, so I came back and I did that last fight, and fought some kickboxer or something. And then that was pretty much it for me. And then I went with ECW, and then they changed my gimmick to Little Guido and all that stuff. And then they're on from there. And then I know Steve went on from there and ran some more shows and did some other stuff. And I kept up with him. At that time, it was a little harder to keep up with people were doing because the internet really wasn't around then. It was dirt sheets and shit like that. So, for me to know what Steve is doing, it's not like 2 clicks of the button. You got to
exactly.
and stuff like that. And then until the internet came along, and then you're able to look things up. And then I looked up our matches and stuff like that. So that was it. That was my time with Steve. And I actually just spoke to Steve, I'm going to say about a year ago. We ended up hooking up on the phone, just chatting for a while about maybe a year and a half ago. So I've before that, I don't think we spoke for years and years, not for any reason. It's just, he's doing his thing, I'm doing mine. So I'm interested to talk to him today.
Yeah, he's a great guy. How I was introduced to Steve through Dan Severn, and Dan, I was also in UWFI with you guys, and Dan and I've done a lot of coaching clinics together over the years, mainly in the Carolinas. And he used to come stay at my house when I lived in the Carolinas. And he was my very first guest when I had the King's Court podcast, started in 2015. And Dan and I used to do like these Feasts with the Beast, which we did a lot of comedy. People don't realize he's funny. He's a funny dude. If you want to hear me roast Dan Severn, the Dan Severn roast is here on the Hannibal TV. But Dan was my first guest on King's Court, and he helped me book some guests. And he said, you ought to have Steve Nelson on. And I knew a little bit about USWF. I think like a lot of folks, like you said, pre-internet, a lot of people didn't know. But man, we had him on a couple times, and he was such a phenomenal guest, man. Amazing history with his promotion, because it was a bridge pro wrestling, because he got, and people, just to explain again, he circumvented, is the best word, the athletic commission in Texas, and was able to do fights with pro wrestling rules. So in other words, with the rope breaks and the open hand strikes of UWFI, and then what became Pancras, as UWFI spawned Pancras. So it was a revolutionary promotion. And then he sent me his whole library of DVDs, all 13 shows of and I saw you fighting on there. And then he sent me the whole Evan Tanner thing, because he was instrumental in Evan Tanner's career. And Evan Tanner was a UFC middleweight champion who is forgotten by the fans of today. He died out there in the desert. He went for a long excursion in the desert and didn't make it. So yeah, man, amazing. I want to ask you, Nunzio, your thoughts. You had the opportunity to train with the legendary Billy Robinson, and your thoughts on your time with Billy Robinson.
I was very lucky because I didn't know much about Billy Robinson when I first met him. I heard a little bit about him. I never got a chance to see him wrestle because, he was always down in the AWA. I lived in New York. I didn't get any of that TV. And again, he was in a few magazines, so I knew of him. Until I came to UWFI is how I really kind of get to meet him. And then I got a quick lesson on who he was. And I knew who, Carl Gotch and all that. And he's from that whole group of shooters and stuff. So when I first started, I didn't know too much about Billy. And then I learned as I was there, and then started watching some video of him and seeing, what went on. But I always know it was an honor. I'm very lucky. One of the very few that I got trained by him. And so obviously now what I know now about him, I know everything about him, but he was an all-time great. He taught me a lot of things. One thing I'll never forget, he said this, and I said this, Jack, on your podcast. He's like, because I met him towards the end. He was, not that he was old, but he had bad knees and stuff. He was put through the mill. He was having rough times. He couldn't walk and stuff like that, but he told me one day, he sat me down, and me and him, we became friends because I like to drink. He liked to drink, so that kind of gave us a nice bond. He knows every time after we would go drinking, we'd go back to his house, and then he would move the table. You could ask Billy Scott and Gene Leidig, and then he would fucking stretch me in the living room. I had burns all over my knees and shit. I'd show up at practice the next day, you're hanging out with Billy. Yeah. Instead of going home like a smart guy. Good fun, though. It was good fun.
It's awesome. What did he drink? He's a British dude. Jake was telling me that he was he more of a beer guy?
Billy drank everything every week. Me and Gene, because he didn't have. We lived all in the same. We lived all. UWFI paid for our apartments in Nashville. I lived with Gene Leidig and his girlfriend Beverly, two bedroom and everything. And Billy Scott was in Kentucky, and Billy Robinson had an apartment next to mine, and we used to train every day from I think 12 to 5. We would go. Me and Gene would pick up Billy and take him to practice every day, and then they would take us all out to eat, and then that was it. Then we went to practice the next day, and then I would hang out with Billy, in the bars and stuff like that. But he could drink. He would drink whiskey. He would drink beer every week. Me and Gene would have to pick him up, and we would take him to the liquor store, and he would buy like $150 worth of alcohol. And it's not like he has a million guests coming over, and until he met me, I was drinking with him. But he was he was a heavy drinker, and he was a fun guy. I had so much fun with him, and he liked to go out too. He liked to have a good time. So
nice. That's awesome. Jake Shannon was telling me that because he was on here. He went on Briscoe Bradshaw's show with me to talk about Billy Robinson. And he was telling me that he was in England with Billy towards his later years, because he used to take him to do coaching camps and he said that he couldn't keep up with him. And I would have liked to go out drinking with him, man. I mean, my old timer, shooter mentor largely was Billy Wicks, and we loved to pound the beers. We'd be at his house, and he had the wrestling match there. He loved to throw it back. What are some of your favorite adult beverages, Nunzio?
But I'll tell you one thing about Bill. The good thing is we used to go to Japan every 3 weeks. So I would fly with me, Gene Laddick, Billy Scott, Billy Robinson, and we'd fly from Nashville to Japan. And when you say try to keep up with him, we would get to the airport and we would party in the airport. And we always got into the clubs too, because we were flying all the time. We had to give him the free booze. Then he would keep it going till we got on the plane. And then it was international, was free, so forget about it. But he taught me one thing. He's like, listen, he goes, when you're taking on national flight, especially if they're 12 hours, he goes, you can't hit the same still with us for beers. You got to work the room. He's like, because there's like 12 of them. But if you ask for 4 or 5 beers for one, they don't know you. So they're like, oh, this guy just drank 5 beers. He's like, you get 2 from her. Then when they're not looking, you walk around, you get 2 from somebody else. You get 2 from somebody else. Don't let them all communicate that you're getting beers. I'm like, that's a great learning experience. I'm like, and you know what? He's absolutely right. You go down smaller flights and there's only 2 stewardess and it's a 4-hour flight. You have 5, 6 beers. They may be like, sir, they don't know. Even if your phone can't handle 5 beers. So
that's some old school knowledge that he was dropping. That's some old school knowledge.
And it came in handy because I flew over the world. And
that's great.
Many times. I did it in India direct, 16 hours, 5 minutes, twice. So that his experience, being in WWE and ECW and flying around came in very handy.
Hell yeah. What do you drink on the plane there, Mr. Kilby?
I do Virgin Caesars, bro.
You drink milk.
Well, something like that. Well, we have a break in the action. Nunzio, a fan is asking, do you keep in touch with Chuck Palumbo in that classic faction you had in WWE, the FBI?
I certainly do. I keep in touch with Chuck, and he's actually a cop now in Vegas. When I say I talk to him a lot more in text messaging and stuff like that. And it's probably every few months, or it could go 6 months. So do I keep in touch? Yeah, and it's good with like with Johnny too. He's on Instagram, so we times there something. So I do keep in touch with Chuck. I was very happy for him after he had a nice motorcycle show that ran for a couple seasons, I believe. And I was psyched to be on TV doing that. So yeah, for the part, I still talk to him.
What did you think of that bump that Stambolia took in WCW with the leg drop off the top rope? That's got to be right up there with where he shattered his pelvis. That's got to be one of the most extreme that I've ever seen. Do you recall that one?
I'm trying to think. That again?
He went to leg drop he did leg drop an opponent on the outside.
Johnny Stambolia, Tom
It was Stambolia, yeah.
Oh, Stambolia. No, I don't remember that actually at WCW. I was never in WCW with him. But I just thought you might have seen it because that was tremendous. No.
Yeah, because you had really 2 different factions, right? You had the Mamalukes that Disco and Graham Gilberti started. That was WCW. And then you had the FBI. And I'm going to ask you about a venue that was so much fun. Holy shit. This place, it was in New Britain, Connecticut, the ECW. We used to have a blast going there. It was right attached to a titty bar, attached to a strip club. It was called The Sting.
The Sting, yeah.
The Sting in New Britain.
The dressing room used to overlook the titty bar, and we used to watch the girls dance.
Yeah.
I wrestled Sabu there, and I wrestled... Me and Tommy Richard, Tracy's mother, wrestled Sabu and Rob Van Dam. That was in a little bar. That was a small little strip bar.
Yeah, it was the Sting. That place burned down. That place, they said it was I don't know, it's not politically correct to use the term, but Jewish lightning. that place burned to the ground. Might have been an insurance job there, Nunzio, from what I understood. That was a famous place in New Britain. It had the titty bar on one side, and then the titty bar bled into the bar venue where they had the wrestling shows. So I remember, like, this is back in the day before politically correctness. I remember some 10-year-old kids screaming, "Show your tits, show your tits" to some of the valets at that show, at those shows at the Sting. I went to a couple of them before the Sting burned to the ground. But ECW, man, in that time was such a fun promotion.
Well, you said you had
What a cool, fun promotion it was. Jack, I was just going to ask Jack, did you ever get to attend an ECW show?
You bet. Yep. At the ECW arena, all the way from coming from Toronto down to Swanson Rittner. And I had the pleasure of seeing Mr. Guido perform live amongst others. And that's why I am a diehard ECW fan to this day. But Guido, you were going to say something, I guess, about that venue in question.
No, not the venue. Right before that, he said they would Mama Luke's. When WCW was going on, Paulie started the FBI in ECW with me and Tony Mama Luke and Tracy Smothers and Tommy Rich and all that. As that was going on, WCW came up with the Mama run by Tony Mama. And he was in WCW. Then Tony came to ECW after WCW. So we were doing the first. Tony was the manager, and it was Stambolia and Big Vito. They were the Mama Lukes in WCW. We were the FBI. Then WCW closed, and Mama Luke came to ECW and tagged with me for the last year. Then ECW closed. And then when we went to the WWE, the new FBI became me, Chuck Palumbo, Johnny Stambolia. Big Vito was one of the Mama Lukes, WCW, with Johnny Stambolia, and Tony Mama Luke was Tony Marinara, and he was their manager. He's come out with the.
That's right. I do remember that. Well, do you still marvel at the fans that recall your angle with the new FBI in WWE with the Undertaker? I had so many fans on Saturday talking about that, actually.
Yeah. Again, the power of the people that didn't. So they are like 12, 13-year-old kids saying, "Oh, I love ECW." They were not even born, so because it keeps that stuff coming back. Hear about Undertaker up the beer, have them if you Google it's Goldberg, somebody. Well, I have to like. I mean, it looked at, but it is what it is. So that's it. So.
King, did you want to talk about your experience in terms of the interface between shoot fighting and into professional wrestling, and your experience that and those that have made the I know this is a rather controversial area for some people, but the transition or jump to pro wrestling?
No, not at all, Jack. I just want to encourage people to educate themselves and read the Rough and Tumble book that Eric Paulson and I wrote 15 years ago, and learn some history. We touched upon it here with Nunzio, but most people are ignorant to the history, and I want them to buy the book. I want them to message me, and I'll get them a signed copy for the right price. And I want them to learn the history. You always kind of frame the question wrong. I'm not going to scold you for that, Jack. But people need to read the book, and they need to learn. They need to learn the history. But I just want to ask you this, Jack. Do you think that Nunzio might join the big money players? Would you welcome him into the faction? I'm putting you on the spot, Jack.
Most definitely, but the crowd seems to really love Nunzio, no matter what, and judging by the reaction that we received in Smith Falls, I think he would be probably too popular for our little group of dastardly individuals. But good question though. I will definitely send you a Big Money Player shirt for promotional purposes, though, sir. Before we go, you've been very generous with your time again. Nunzio, do you have any appearances that you'd like to mention in the near future, or where the fans can keep in touch with you on social media?
Yeah, I got my Nunzio, 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 uh, and I actually, I got really
Well, for those fans that may have missed that, we will. We had a little audio glitch there. I will make sure and post that in this description. King, do you have any closing thoughts for Nunzio and this particular episode of Old School Shooters? Are you going to do the song gimmick, or is that best
I have a
left in the
closing
sands of
song.
time?
I have a closing song because Nunzio is from the Big Apple, and this is a song from the chairman of the board, a little verse that encapsulates what Old School Shooters is all about. I've been to town, beyond the boulevard, down the beach, and I've learned things that only time can teach. Old School Shooters, silver sages, spreading knowledge to the younger ages, all the youngins out there.
Fans, that's it for this edition of Old School Shooters. Thanks once again to our guest, Nunzio Little Guido, and we will see you again.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Follow us on Twitter